Okay, so now we're going to talk about the cluster A personality disorders. Those are the ones that are characterized by odd or eccentric behavior, really varies from cultural norms. The weird disorders. Paranoid personality disorder is the first of these, and it is a distrustful and suspicious attitude towards others. They always ascribe these negative motivations. Persons never acting in their best interests. They do not believe that intentions are sincere. This condition begins by early adulthood and it presents in a lot of different ways. More common in men than in women, but do not get confused. This is not the same kind of paranoia you get with psychosis. The difference is everyone's trying to cheat you in this world. They're always trying to rip you off versus the Illuminati is out to get me. I mean, it's not a bizarre paranoia, it's a low level, not trusting anyone. So these people have serious trust issues. They are always on guard. They're always looking for the motive behind what you do. They can appear tense and irritable because they don't sense good intentions in you. They believe others are trying to harm them. They're hostile. They avoid interactions with other people, and they just don't trust people. These individuals are maintaining their self esteem by blaming others for their shortcomings. And when we talked about defense mechanisms, projection is their primary go to. And they used it so often and became ingrained, and it was part of their personality and colored everything they saw. So when you're always being blamed for something, you're looking for someone else. And that's probably the parental link. With personality disorders, there's a lot of blaming mom. It's sort of a Freudian hangover. But probably there are people whose egos, for whatever reason, they are born with some innate temperament that makes their ego very sensitive to criticism and blame. And so they use projection to defend their ego, and it becomes part of their personality. Moving on to schizoid personality disorder. The name has nothing, despite the fact that it sounds like schizophrenia, it has nothing whatsoever to do with schizophrenia. It is a completely separate disorder. It's characterized by people who do not like people. They generally avoid people at all costs. They are extreme introverts. There's a failure to bond with people on an emotional level. Sometimes there's a failure to look at cues. The diagnosis, interestingly, just like autism, occurs more frequently in men than in women, prevalence 3 to 7.5%. But a lot of the folks who used to get a diagnosis of schizoid personality disorder are more properly being diagnosed on the autism spectrum now. And there are reasons for that. When we talk about autism and childhood disorders, sometimes interactions with others are very draining for those folks because of their sensory issues and their social deficits. But anyway, back to the discussion of true schizoid personality disorder. These people don't form deep relationships. They are socially withdrawn. They're self-absorbed. They look either cold and aloof or shy and anxious around others, but they don't like social contact. They prefer to work and live alone and little desire for emotional ties. And we're going to contrast that with avoidant personality disorder. It's one of the cluster C worried ones. They also tend to be alone a lot, but not really by conscious choice. They're more afraid of rejection. So schizoid, think of somebody who just really does not like people and prefers not to be around them. There is a hereditary factor, and of course, we like to blame mom for being cold and unempathetic and not nurturing enough, or maybe they were abandoned by mom or mom died, but always, sort of a Freudian hangover. Possibly a hereditary factor. And yes, people are sometimes more introverted or less introverted. And sometimes when you just get a poor fit, introverts don't always fit into an extroverted world. Sometimes the response is to withdraw further and ignore that slide. Schizotypal personality disorder. Again, do not confuse this with schizophrenia, although this has some tie into schizophrenia. It's the weirdest of the weird. It affects about 1 to 2% of the population. It doesn't lead to the same devastating impairment that schizophrenia does, but we have people who tend to be loners. They behave in a way that's a little bit off, a little bland. They feel misunderstood because they have these sort of bizarre ideas. They are not bizarre like schizophrenia, but you might get people who believe in like auras or telepathy or sixth sense. I'm an empath. Um, I have to watch the power of my thoughts to hurt people. It's not as severe as schizophrenia, but there's definitely a lot of like flaky thinking. Um, they sometimes will talk to themselves as if living in their own world. Sometimes this is part of that pre-morbid phase of schizophrenia when you see it in young people. Sometimes they'll tip over into psychosis. Generally, they're in the same reality as we are. They might believe in aliens. They might believe in, all kinds of stuff. They tend to be a little bit flighty, but they can still usually function. There is a hereditary factor. Yes, dopamine probably has an influence here. Um, Again, let's blame mom, indifference, people who don't respond to their needs. There might be a lot of formality in the environment. There's not a lot of personal warmth or affection and closeness in the family unit, or so they say. And that's schizotypal. And we're going to kind of exit there, and I'll make another video for cluster B.